Hey guys, my name is Rob, and today we're reviewing the ZD Ultimate Legend. This is a wireless controller compatible with PC, Switch, and mobile, and it's a modular controller, kind of like ZD's O Plus Excellence that we reviewed a few months ago, though a bit less customizable. That said, I'm going to do something I rarely do and spoil this video in the intro by telling you that unlike with the O Plus Excellence, which I didn't like as much as a lot of other people in the community, I've been very impressed with the Ultimate Legend, and I can't wait to tell you about it. So let's go ahead and check it out. Full disclosure, this gamepad was sent to me for review, so thank you to ZD. That said, I was not paid for this review, nor was I asked to specifically say or not say anything about the controller. In the box, we have the controller, which we'll set aside for now. On the bottom side of the box, we have a small package, and this has a set of replacement face buttons, along with a pair of tweezers for changing the buttons out. And then there's also a QC card in here. Next, we have the USB dongle, which has the ZD logo on it, as well as a pairing button. Next, we have the thumbstick caps, and when I first opened the box, I assumed these were alternate or additional caps, but these are actually the only ones included. They're just not installed in the box. Then under this insert, we have a few more items, including the USB-A to USB-C cable. This is a nice braided cable, and it's very soft, not stiff like a lot of cables, but it is on the shorter side. I think it's 6 feet. Next, we have these oddly shaped buttons, which serve as the inner back buttons on the Ultimate Legend. We'll install these in a moment, and we're going to talk about them a lot. They're one of the only things I don't really like about the Ultimate Legend. Then we have a set of alternate D-pad options, and if you own or have watched reviews of the O Plus Excellence, these should look very familiar, as this is exactly the same set of D-pads that come with that controller. And lastly, we have the paperwork, which consists of an English language manual, an info card with a link to the official ZD Discord server, and a second manual that's in Chinese. And then finally, we have the gamepad itself. As mentioned before, the thumbsticks aren't installed for shipping, so we'll pop those on really quickly, and then we'll also install the two extra back buttons. Again, I have a lot to say about these buttons in particular, but we'll get into that in a bit. The controller itself feels very good. It has textured grips and also a nice weight to it. I measured it at 300 grams, and overall it's very comfortable. Again, just feels good. As far as features, we have micro switch face buttons, and I really like the feel of these. They have pretty light resistance and a very short travel distance. Overall, I like them a lot, no complaints at all. The D-pad is also a micro switch, which I love to see. I wish this was more common on controllers. They feel similar to the face buttons, but are a bit more stiff, which is fine and possibly even a good thing depending on what type of games you play. I will say I don't love the default D-pad, but as we saw, there are other options included, so we'll take a look at those a little later. Then we have the thumbsticks, and they are modular like the O Plus Excellence, so they can be swapped out, but the pre-installed sticks are TMRs, specifically Genful TMRs, I think. ZD was kind enough to send me a few other modules as well, though, so we'll go over how to change these out. Other front inputs include the home button, the start or menu button, the back or view button, the mode button, and then finally, we have the first of 8 extra buttons, the M3 and M4 buttons, which are these small triangular buttons beside the left and right thumbsticks. These are very interesting, and I'm going to say pretty unique, though to be fair, they are becoming more common, and I'll be reviewing several controllers in the near future that have similar inputs. I do question how useful these will be during gameplay for a lot of people, but I'm also not going to complain about having these as an option, especially since we have 6 other extra inputs. Up top, we have the bumpers, which are micro switch and feel amazing to actuate. They're also flat and kind of low rise, so I like the physical feel as well. My only complaint is that I do wish there were a bit of texture on top, but they're just smooth and slick, other than right at the edge where they meet the triggers. Then we have 2 extra shoulder buttons labeled LK and RK, and these are also micro switch. They feel really good as well. I love the position of these buttons on the Ultimate Legend. They're very easy to reach, so I have absolutely no issues pressing these without altering my grip, which is not always the case with extra bumper buttons, but I also have zero issues with unintentional presses or with accidentally pressing the triggers in the process. Speaking of triggers, these are linear Hall effect triggers. They feel fine, but they do require a bit more pressure to press than most triggers, which I just mentioned because I would imagine some people could be bothered by this, but it doesn't bother me. Beyond that, though, I love the design of the triggers. They're the wider, flatter style that I prefer, and they have a bit of texture or grip, which I also love to see. And most importantly, we also get micro switch trigger stops that are absolutely great. First off, I love the way the lock switch is designed. The latch is kind of recessed, and you actually have to push in on it and slide it over into place. The result is that these are very much out of the way. You don't have to worry about unintentionally hitting them while playing, which kind of adds to both functionality and comfort. Then, as far as the actual function, these are legitimate instant mouse click trigger stops that feel phenomenal. Also on the back, we have four rear buttons, and the lower or outer ones are M1 and M2. And sticking with the theme of the controller, these are micro switch, which is kind of rare for back buttons, but I'm happy to see it and they feel great. Then we have the half moon buttons, which are labeled LM and RM, and these are weird. They both look weird and, in my opinion, are very awkward to use. They are removable, but can only be installed in this position and can only be actuated by pressing down, which means you kind of have to bring your finger out and over the top of the buttons to actuate them. This is easily my biggest complaint about the Ultimate Legend, as I just don't really understand this design choice. I think if they were designed so that you could push up on the button, they would be much more usable for me, but that's just not the case, which is a bit unfortunate. Also, back here, we have the pins for the charging dock. Below that is the pairing button. And then there's a pinhole here, which I have to assume is a reset hole, though it's not mentioned at all in the manual. Next, we'll look at customization, and we'll start with the modular options. The D-pad is easy to remove, it just pulls off, and with the D-pad out of the way, the faceplate is also removable, but I will say it takes some pressure to remove. It has magnets at the bottom of each grip, but just snaps into place at the top, so I would recommend a bit of caution when taking it off. With the faceplate removed, we can look at the rest of the modular components, starting with the face buttons. As we saw earlier, the Ultimate Legend comes with these tweezers, which you can use, but to be honest, with the faceplate off, you can literally just pick these buttons up with your fingers, and they come right out. As you can kind of see, each button has a slightly different base, so they'll only fit in a specific slot, which is why they include another set of buttons. These are designed for the Nintendo Switch layout. I'll primarily be using the Ultimate Legend on PC, so I'm going to leave the default buttons in, but it's cool that ZD does include this option for people who plan to play on Switch. Then we have the thumbstick modules. Both the caps and bases just pull off, though you don't actually have to take the bases off when you remove the modules, since the replacement modules actually come with new bases. Either way, though, the modules are easy to remove. As the text on the sub faceplate indicates, there's a latch to the right of each thumbstick, and if you press that latch, it releases the module, and then it just pulls out. Again, ZD was kind enough to send me several replacement modules, which includes two different brands of potentiometer sticks, but also a set of K-Silver JS13 Pro TMRs. These sticks have been highly anticipated by the general Pro controller community, and as far as I know, the Ultimate Legend is now the first controller to actually use the JS13 Pros, so of course we're going to install these and test them out. Installing them is very easy, they will only go in one way, and you can see there's a slot on each module that lines up with the latch. They press into place, and you can both hear and feel them lock in. Next, we'll look at the D-pad options, which again are the same as those that came with the O Plus Excellence controller. A couple of these are strange, including this super concave circular D-pad. I appreciate that ZD elected to provide lots of options for different preferences, but I don't love this one. It's not, however, the weirdest one. That would be this one. If you feel like you need a third joystick instead of a D-pad, there you go. Then we have this, which is pretty much identical to the circular D-pad on the Xbox Elite controllers. And this one is okay, I don't mind it at all, I could definitely use it. But my favorite is just the four-way D-pad, and that's mostly what I've been using. I did, however, order this soft touch D-pad set from GadgetHyper.com. So specifically, I've been using the matte silver soft touch four-way D-pad, and I'll leave a link to these in the description below. They're pretty much just what they sound like, and this set includes all of the same designs. I was placing an order anyway because I wanted to pick up the charging dock, so decided to try these out. They're certainly not necessary, but again, I like them, so I'm happy with the purchase. I do want to look at the stick caps. I'll be using a Skull and Company concave on the left, and this is an Xbox version, which will have to stretch just a little bit to fit on the Ultimate Legend. And then typically I would use a mid-rise Control Freak on the right, and technically this Xbox one will fit, but it's very tight, enough so that I'm not super comfortable putting it on here. PlayStation Control Freaks are way too big and pretty much just fall off, so what I'm actually using now is off-brand ones that I bought on AliExpress that are advertised as PS4 caps, but they're actually kind of in between Xbox and PlayStation sizes. which is handy for me because they work well on the Ultimate Legend, as well as a couple of other gamepads that I use. So I'm actually really glad that I bought these, even though the advertising isn't exactly right on them. Next, we'll look at operation and settings, and the first thing we're going to do is turn on the Ultimate Legend using the home button. Right now, the light is flashing at me because I forgot I wasn't in wireless dongle mode the last time I used this controller, so I'm going to long press the home button to turn it back off, and we'll talk about mode swapping. Since I want 2.4 wireless mode, I'm going to hold home and Y together to power on in that mode, and you'll notice the light flashes blue, then stays solid when connected. It then changes to a lighter blue, and that's just the home button color I have programmed for the profile I'm on. When powering on, you can also hold A or B plus the home button to enter Bluetooth mode, which is represented by a green indicator light, or you can hold X and home to enter switch mode, and that light will be red. I also have the other lighting off on this profile because I honestly don't love the RGB on this controller, and I just think it looks better without it. That said, we can see what it looks like by switching to another profile, which is super easy on this gamepad. You can hold start in any D-pad direction for 3 seconds. D-pad up, left, down, and right correspond to profiles 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. This is the default lighting effect, which you can customize and lower the brightness, change the pattern, etc. But again, I actually really like the looks of this controller without the RGB lighting, so I've just been using it with the lighting turned off, other than the home button to show what profile is active. Also, if you're in dongle or wired mode, you can change the connection protocol between X input and switch mode by long pressing start and back together. Aside from modes and profiles, there are a number of other things we can set on the gamepad. First, there's turbo, which you can enable by long pressing mode plus any face button, trigger, or bumper. The first time you do this will enable manual turbo. Pressing the same button combination again will enable auto turbo for that input, so you press to engage and press again to disengage. And then pressing the same button combination for a third time will disable turbo for that input. Next, we'll look at assigning the extra buttons, but I am going to change profiles before I do that because I don't want to program over my main profile. In the default profiles, the button beside the left thumbstick, M3, cycles through lighting modes, so I'm going to use that to turn the main RGB lighting off. To program the extra buttons, you can hold mode plus any one of the extra buttons for 2 seconds to enter programming mode. The indicator light will flash while in programming mode, and then you can press whatever button you want to assign it to that input, and then press mode again to save. You can also program macros this way, so you can enter programming mode and then press whatever combination of buttons you want, and then press mode to save. According to the manual, this supports up to 32 inputs, which is crazy. This method of programming works for all of the extra buttons, so the M3 and 4 on front, the LK and RK on top, and the M1 and 2 and LM and RM on the back. Then we have calibration options. First, you can calibrate the thumbsticks by pressing D-pad up, mode, and A, and the indicator light will flash while in calibration mode. Rotate both sticks about 3 or 4 times, and then press mode to save calibration. To calibrate the triggers, press D-pad up, mode, and X, and then you'll fully press both triggers 3 to 4 times, and again press mode to save. For gyro calibration, press D-pad up, mode, and B. Unlike on most gamepads, this calibration doesn't auto-complete, so per the manual, just give it about 3 seconds on a flat surface, and then press mode to save calibration. And then lastly, I'm not going to do it right now because I don't have a need to, but you can reset the Ultimate Legend by holding back and mode for 2 seconds. That pretty much covers all of the customization and settings you can do on the gamepad itself, but there's a lot more you can do in the app, which we'll look at now. This is the ZD mobile app, which is available on iOS and Android, and as of the time of this recording, this is the only customization app available for ZD controllers, meaning there's not currently a PC app. There is one in the works, and the last I knew, they were expecting to launch in November. To be honest with you, though, I don't really care about the PC app at this point because you really can do pretty much everything you need to in the mobile app. And beyond that, you can also simultaneously pair via Bluetooth while connected to PC via wired or wireless connection, which means you can make changes in the app in real time while playing a game. And it's actually kind of more convenient than alt tabbing out of a game and pulling up a PC app. So, yeah, I'm in no hurry really. In the top right box, you can hit scan to find the controller, which takes you to this page where you'll tap connect. Once the gamepad is paired, the scan button is replaced by a settings button. When you tap settings, it takes you to this page. On the top, it shows you some general information about the controller, including firmware version, sleep timer settings, and charge level. And just below that, you can select which profile you're customizing. Then below that, you have the actual customization tabs. The first one is button mapping, and this tab is specifically for the basic controller inputs, not the extra buttons. But you can remap pretty much every button on the controller other than the home and mode buttons. You can also map both controller inputs as well as keyboard and mouse inputs. This pop-up is warning you that you may need to long press mode plus start to enter competitive mode to use keyboard mapping features, and also says you may need to manually download drivers in order to use this feature. And I'm honestly not sure what's up with this message. I didn't have to do either one of these things, and no one else I've talked to about this controller has had to either, so I don't know. You can also enable turbo on any of these inputs from this page, and you can adjust the turbo rate or frequency, which is something you can't do directly on the gamepad. The next tab is for joystick tuning, and here you can invert both X and Y axes independently, and you can adjust the inner and outer dead zones. At the bottom of the page, you can also adjust the sensitivity curve, and those are all of the kind of standard settings you would expect, but in addition to the left and right joystick tabs, there's also a tab that says swap. This does have the options to swap around the left stick, right stick, and D-pad, but at the very bottom of this tab, there's also an option for step size. We'll get more into this in testing, but essentially this gives you 8 different options for adjusting stick resolution, with 255 at the far right being equivalent to 8-bit sampling, and 1 at the far left being equivalent to 12 or 14, I don't know, something. It's high. I'm glad this option is here, but it does feel just a little bit hidden to me because I'm not sure how many people are going to look for this under the swap tab. The next tab is for vibration, and here you can adjust each grip and trigger motor separately. And there are also a few vibration modes you can choose from with brief explanations. I'm kind of going to gloss over this because I'm just not the right person to give you a detailed opinion about vibration modes or settings, because I only play FPS games, so turning off vibration is pretty much the first thing I do on any controller. The next tab is for lighting, which has sub-tabs for the home button light, and then the left and right sides of the controller. On each tab, you can choose between several modes, adjust the brightness, and for some of these modes, such as static, you can also select a specific color. There's also an on-off switch for each lighting section, so you can turn off the lighting completely if you want, which again, I do that for the left and right sides, and just have color for the home button to differentiate between profiles. We're going to skip over disconnect because all that does is actually disconnect the controller from the app, which we don't want to do right now. So the next tab is for report rate, which by default is set on this mode that's in Chinese. And per Google Translate, this says unlimited and then in parentheses, depending on device. We'll get into testing in just a moment and see what that really means. You'll notice there are separate report rates for wired, 2.4 gigahertz wireless, and Bluetooth. I only really play wired, but we'll go ahead and set the wireless report rate as high as we can so we can test that as well. Then the next tab is for trigger settings, and there's not a ton to go over here, just trigger min and max dead zones, and you can manually set instant triggers. But if you have the trigger locks engaged, the triggers are automatically set to on off, so that option won't actually matter. Next, we have gyro controls, which I'm not going to spend much time on, because again, I'm just not the right source for gyro feedback. I don't use it at all. That said, you can map to left or right stick. You can set to always on, hold to activate, or tap to activate. You can set to fire or car mode, which I'm going to take a giant leap here and assume that means shooter mode or racing mode. And you can set an input as the activation button. Then if you scroll to the very bottom of the tab, there's a slider to adjust sensitivity. The next tab is for sleep settings, which is very limited. You can set the controller to auto sleep in 15 minutes, 60 minutes, or never. Then we have the macro tab, and this is where you can program the 8 additional inputs on the controller. Just like the button tab we looked at, here you can set controller inputs, keyboard inputs, or mouse inputs, and you can also record macros. Just to test it, I tried inputting a mixture of gamepad and keyboard inputs, and it does work. I don't know how useful that is for anyone. I don't use macros at all, but I have had other people ask about that before on other controller reviews, so there you go. The next tab is for controller test, and when you click on this, it does prompt you to use a USB connection to avoid latency, but it will let you enter testing in Bluetooth mode. Then finally, the last tab is restore defaults, which we're not going to do, and that finally covers the app. Again, it's very extensive for a mobile app, so it doesn't really feel like a huge compromise to me, but if it does to you, just be aware that the PC app is allegedly on the way. Next, we'll jump to testing, starting with wired polling rate. This is set on the unlimited mode, and ZD has stated this should be at least 3000 Hz, but I've very consistently been getting around 4000, so yeah, pretty darn good. Wireless polling rate is a bit of a different story. I've been getting around 8 to 900 Hz when set to 1000, and that was an issue I always had with the O Plus Excellence controller. In dongle mode, it was never getting anywhere near the advertised 1000 Hz. That said, looking at latency testing on Gamepad LA, the Ultimate Legend isn't terrible in dongle mode, but it's fantastic in wired mode. And obviously, we're talking about X input mode, as latency is noticeably worse in switch mode pretty much across the board. Next, we'll look at resolution, and I didn't test every step setting available in the app, but I did do a few. This is the default 74, which gives us a resolution of 414. Next, I checked at 255, so far right on the slider bar in the app, and I got 125 resolution, so what we typically see with 8-bit resolution. And lastly, I tested at 1 or far left in the app and got 3853 resolution. I personally use this setting. I prefer higher resolution, which feels more responsive and accurate to me. But other people disagree, so if you're not sure, maybe test a few options here and see what works best for you. And then finally, we'll look at Gamepad Tester, and as you can see, the sticks are not returning to a consistent resting point. But that said, these numbers are very, very small, and I have absolutely no stick drift in game. As far as circularity, these are set to a rectangular algorithm, and as far as I can tell, there's no option to change this, which is fine, but I will say the shading here doesn't look fantastic. I have recalibrated a bunch of times with all of the modules I have on hand, and honestly, this is the best it's looked. To be clear, the sticks feel great, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment, but I would like to see more even shading here. So, conclusions. I'm going to be very clear up front. This is currently my favorite controller by a fairly wide margin. I test a lot of controllers and therefore use a lot of controllers on a daily and weekly basis. But for the most part, over the last few weeks, when I haven't specifically been testing something else, this is the controller I've reached for. There's no such thing as a perfect controller, but this one is pretty darn close, at least for me. The only major complaint I have is these half moon rear buttons, which I truly dislike, but these are removable, and I hope and expect that ZD will release other options for these in the future. In the meantime, I found a very simple workaround using these tactile push button caps that I just had on hand. They fit perfectly in these holes, but they are loose, so I just put a tiny dab of hot glue on the inside of these buttons and let it mostly cool before sticking it on to ensure I didn't damage the actual controller. That worked very well for me. It basically just made it into a mold because I let the glue get mostly dry. So I can actually take these off and put them back on easily now, and they do stay in place. They've never fallen off, and I've used them a ton. Outside of that, there's not much I can complain about with the Ultimate Legend. It just checks all the boxes for me. It's an almost entirely mechanical input controller with tons of extra inputs and keyboard mapping. It's comfortable in the hand, it has great latency, or lack thereof, I guess, and it has replaceable thumbstick modules with multiple great options. I've actually had a really hard time deciding if I prefer the default Genful TMRs or the JS13 Pros. Based on what I've heard from other testers, I think this is probably an unpopular opinion. Most people seem to think the JS13 Pros are noticeably better, so I guess keep that in mind, but I think both are great and would honestly be perfectly happy with either or. There's not much else I can say about the Ultimate Legend. I love this thing, it's my favorite controller, and in my opinion, it's the best gamepad currently on the market. That's probably the most definitive take I've given on any controller since I tested the Vader 4 Pro back in the day, and of course we've seen a ton of progress and innovation since that gamepad launched, and we'll probably see more in the near future, so it's almost a given that something is going to beat out the Ultimate Legend at some point, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I hope this video helped you out, and if so, please subscribe if you haven't already. Likes are also appreciated, and I do try to react and respond to as many comments as possible. I'll be doing more reviews regularly, so I hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks for watching.